Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Pacino, and I'm very excited to have my buddy Castro Frank on with us tonight. Castro, how you doing, my man?
Everything's gravy, bro. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good, man. I'm so very excited to have this conversation. Can you give a quick introduction to the listeners?
Yeah. My name is Castro. I'm actually based in Los Angeles, born and raised. I've been an artist for over 15 years now. The majority of my work is photography, but I also dabble in like painting and that good stuff. But my focus mainly has been in photography for the last 15 years.
That's awesome. Can you give me a little insight to the beginning of your career 15 years ago? Sort of like what got you started, what made you get into it, the whole nine yards?
Yeah. Well, I can't really dive into that quite yet because the story goes back further than that.
Let's hear it.
Um, Yeah, so basically, I, was raised in LA, and the part of LA where I was raised, it was predominantly gang related. I saw a lot of, crazy shit growing up, with gangs and drugs and all that good stuff all around me. So art wasn't necessarily introduced to me as a means of becoming an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even before that, I never even imagined it. I didn't know what an artist was. I didn't know what photography was. Obviously, I always thought that was somewhat of a profession that you'd see on TV or something like that, but never imagined becoming an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that kind of, it fell on my lap because I really didn't have a way out of the environment where I was growing up, and a lot of it was being kind of like, growing up, you're kind of being pigeonholed into a tough spot where you had to make choices, and it was either going to be gang life because a lot of my homies were a part of that, or it was going to be graffiti and art because a lot of my other homies were a part of that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose the art route, and I remember, being into graffiti at a young age, and I always had a disposable camera. And I obviously, if you know graffiti, a lot of times back then there was no digital cameras. You couldn't really, excuse that. You couldn't really snap photos and post it on
Anywhere.
exactly. It was just
Yeah.
like you have to sort of remember it by using a disposable camera, and that's a lot of times a lot of graffiti artists would carry those around. But I never really imagined it more than that. I just thought it was a tool to use to capture that moment and like a Kodak moment.
Yeah. So it's like
And
one of those things where you would take a picture because you didn't know if the piece would last at all.
exactly.
Oh, man, nice.
Exactly. But I remember when we got arrested, I was about 17, and I remember the police officer finding a camera, and I literally blamed it that I was the person just snapping photos for the graffiti, that I wasn't doing graffiti. So
How'd that work
it
out?
didn't work out. I went to jail. I spent a weekend in jail. That wasn't fun. So yeah, it was one of those things where like it was all fun until you got caught, and the police obviously didn't buy it that I was a photographer or anything like that, and yeah, it was kind of like after that experience, I really started to realize that I was definitely not headed in the right direction. Graffiti was amazing. It's an amazing way to express yourself, and I support it still. And a lot of my friends are obviously still involved in a lot of crews and stuff, and that's always going to be a part of my life. But for me, I kind of like it was more internal because I saw a lot of my peers, a lot of family, they were definitely going the wrong route. People in prison that I knew, and I come you kind of almost accept the fact that your life isn't ahead that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more for my mom because of course like she came to this country as an immigrant, and she wanted us to have a better life, better than she ever had it, of course. And she had big dreams for us, and of course that was all part of like going to school and everything like that. And unfortunately I didn't get to finish high school. I dropped out at an early age, and then I just worked most of my life. But I came to the point of my life where I'm like, okay, I got to kind of switch up things a little bit, and I decided to pursue somewhat of the art, and I dove into photography just kind of head on.
How old were
And
you? How old were you when you made that decision?
I was at that time, I believe I was about like 20 years old,
Mm-hmm.
19 maybe.
Yeah.
And actually I had to move out of the state, so I moved to Vegas, which a lot of people don't know the story really, but I moved out to Vegas and I met a girl there,
Oh
and
wow.
she was from Iowa, And so she ended up moving back to Iowa and she invited me. And of course, there was nothing holding me back. I had nothing really, I didn't really have a place that I called home or anything like that. So I ended up going there and I was doing construction one time in the middle of winter. It was like the worst
Miserable, yeah.
in Iowa. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was crazy. And I remember doing construction, and there was one part of this massive building, and this woman in a suit came up, and she asked me if I knew where I was drilling or what I was working on, and I said no, I had no idea. And she explained that it was going to be a photo lab, and she invited me to apply for a job as a photo tech.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. I wasn't even I never developed film. I never worked with any sort of medium format or anything um, where I had to be in a lab or a lab coat or anything like that. And so yeah, she ended up hiring me, and that was
Isn't
my
that
first job.
like, that is some wild serendipitous shit, right?
Dude, I always felt, and I think back now, I always felt like art was a calling. Like it chose me for a reason, and I don't know. I think obviously it's to create and to, I guess show the world a little bit of a little piece of where I come from, and but yeah, since I was young, I remember these little moments where like my cousin one time I was in Disneyland with her as she I was like 14 or 13 or something like that, and she asked me to take a photo, and like I posed all crazy, like like you see those memes that people make fun of photographers and they do these crazy poses. I did one of those, and she was like, you're really good. You should be like a photographer. And I didn't know what the fuck that was, right? So that was then, but then kind of like piecing everything together, right? So I have like the Disneyland situation, then I have the cop situation with the camera, and then years later I become a photo tech at a photo lab, and I meet this super old dude, and he's like he used to come and develop his film, and I always pointed out his some like just I guess his subjects and how cool his compositions was, and he always thought I had a good eye. He's like, you should be a photographer. If you're not a photographer, you should be when you have a good eye. And he said I should buy a camera, and so I ended up buying his film camera. And yeah, I never looked back from that, man. It's kind of where it started.
Dude, that's wild. I mean, so I have sort of like a similar background where as a kid, I hadn't realized as a kid I shot a lot of disposable cameras. I'm talking like, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, like before, the first digital cameras, like the Coolpix came out, the Nikon Coolpix. Remember those little
Yeah,
things?
I remember those.
Yeah,
They're
so like
sick.
so before those came out, I shot like a lot of disposables. Like, and I just found this out like I want to say a year ago when my parents sold their house. I was like going through all my old shit and I found like all of these 3x5 prints, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what? These are all pictures of my friends. I was like, who took these? And my mom was like, oh, John, you used to make me buy like 2 disposable cameras a week. I go,
That's
that
sick.
whole part 2 years ago when I had no idea what to do with my life and I went on this cross country journey to sort of find myself. Maybe you think that would have been like a good time to like drop that knowledge on me and like let me know
Right,
that,
right.
you know what I mean? But it sounds to
Uh,
me like you had like this sort of like serendipitous sort of relationship with the art. And what was that process like? Like, so you get the job in the film lab, you're now, working in the lab, and when does like your art sort of come into play with that sort of step and moment in your life?
well, yeah, I always kind of like I always imagined myself, um, you know, photographing what was real to me and kind of like remembering moments of my childhood and where I come from. It's something that I never forget because it really made a huge part of who I am
Hmm.
today. And I just I started documenting things that I relate to, and that's when I moved back to LA at that time and everything else. But oh, actually, not even then. Even in Iowa, we went to Chicago one time. I remember this. This is in 2003 or something like that, 2004. Maybe the years are not adding up, but I know it was around 2003.
Hmm.
And we went to Chicago, and I started to immediately like I it resembled home because I'm like, oh, this is like I remember like kind of like the city and the just the fast paced life. Obviously, Iowa has no fast paced life at all. So you can imagine that. Like that was definitely a huge culture
Yeah.
shock for me. But being in Chicago is like, man, this kind of feels like LA a little bit, obviously because of skyscrapers and stuff like that. But then even more the city folks, where it was more of a melting pot of cultures and like people from all walks of life, and I can relate to that. And so I started to photograph like the streets, like the landscapes, some disenfranchised individuals, I don't know who they were, but I was just kind of like intrigued by it. And so that immediately caught my eye. And I think that was a moment where I felt like, okay, like if I'm going to pick any side of photography, I want it to be more of like the documentary side.
Hmm.
Um, and so I moved back to LA and I just dove into the streets and I started to photograph, um, shoes on the wires and, burn down buildings or, like no trespassing signs and Section 8 type of, landscapes and the projects and like, yeah, stuff that I just related to and that was real to me. Like I was photographing my truth. I didn't go into, LA and start photographing like Hollywood or Beverly Hills or anything like that. It was more like, all right, I gotta make sure that I can relate to this type of shit, like not just make art to make it, but to really like speak my truth. And so I was attracted to street photography at that time. Yeah, I didn't know it was street photography really.
Yeah, dude, I think that's beautiful. I think, it's funny how I started doing street photography as well, probably maybe like a couple months before I lost my job, I got really into it. Bought a like M6, drove fully deep into the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah,
And there's something about documenting your life in a way that exhibits the things that people see but ignore. And to me, there's something wonderful about taking the mundane and trying or being able to create beauty out of it.
yeah.
Um, when you originally got into street photography, did you have people who inspired you in the art? Did you have people that you looked up to?
Man, honestly, there was this gang member that I remember who I looked up to when I was a kid, and I always remember him because like he was a dope dude in the streets and like he had the lokes on and the creased up Dickies or Dockers at that time, and he was just a badass dude, smooth looking cat, and I always liked his hustle. He was a humble dude, but very well respected as well, and his name was Dreamer, and he was from this gang called Clanton, and that's kind of the neighborhood where I was raised. But I remember this dude very much, and I always ask about him too. But he was like my hero when I was a kid, and I don't know if it's like it wasn't very artistic, but it was also inspiring because we didn't have superheroes and shit that we looked up to. Like I didn't want to be like my dad because my stepdad raised me. I don't want to be like him. I felt like he was an asshole at that time, but I mean, I love him. I think without him, I would definitely be in gangs and I would have definitely been into a lot more trouble than I was. But I definitely feel like we didn't have a lot of good role models growing up, except the hustle for my mom and that sort of thing. But um, in as far as art goes, my cousin was an inspiration when I was young. He was a graffiti writer, also respected in the graph community. And but no, I wouldn't say people like now I'm inspired more by artists than I was before.
Sure.
If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I'm super curious about so like, at the time when you're back in LA and you're like, you know, going through ups and downs, right? Gang life and rough neighborhood and stuff. Did any I mean, number one, there had to be some element of danger to documenting that kind of stuff, right? So like you're inherently putting yourself in harm's way, number one. And then number two, when you put yourself behind the camera like that, did it feel sort of like an escape, like putting yourself outside of the environment a little bit?
I think it kind of was a sense of like I think it felt like I was doing an important job of documenting um, the truth, and I never felt like I was in danger. Really, I didn't feel out of my element. I never. I think if anything, it was on the contrary. I felt more like I was a part of the community,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like I can relate to this person. If we're talking on a struggle base, or if we're talking on like, just living that same walk, that having that same kind of walk of life, like we've experienced together. We could talk about it, we could relate about certain topics, but I never felt like I was in danger, or I never felt like, I was out of place. I always felt very respectful towards anybody that I approach, and I think that's something that, like, honestly, it was embedded in me by my mom for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but also by the streets too. Like you respect people, and you don't like you don't cross boundaries, and like you know when it feels wrong when you're crossing that fine line, and you just know, okay, I think I'm overstepping, and like
Totally.
you know when to retract. So
Yeah,
no, I never.
no. I appreciate
fun.
that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering a little bit about how your process sort of unfolds at that time in your life and your career, right? So, like, talk to me about your need and your want to create. It's something that I feel very strongly about now as a full time photographer, where, like, if I go, like, say 3 4 days without shooting, like, I just am I'm like mad, right? I'm miserable. I'm like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, I can't do the thing that I love to do. So talk to me a little bit about what that process was like at that moment in your career, and then, like, obviously moving forward into the future.
Honestly, I think that once I found, photography as an outlet of, again, documenting what I felt was the truth for me. Um, I never saw it like I never saw like, oh man, I have to go out and create. Like I think I feel that now more than ever. Like before I didn't at that time it wasn't I didn't again, I wasn't thinking about an art career. I wasn't thinking about, you know, what an artist is like a full rounded artist is about. Like I only thought that I was just out there kind of like, clicking away and composing images and creating images that I thought was like, oh, this is dope. Like I'm gonna remember this moment, or like, I met this guy and he had a crazy ass story and like I want to remember it. But it was never like about like I'm gonna go out and create, or it was like something on my agenda that I had to go do. It was something like just I can't explain it, man. It was a part of my life. I feel like I had to do it. Like
Yeah.
it was like going to the gym,
Yeah.
like
It was
it
built
didn't feel like
inside.
yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't feel like I was kind of like I needed to escape. Like I know what you mean though, but like I'm trying to like really put like formulate the right expression of how to really tell you like I never thought about it like a way of having to create, or I never thought about it like a profession or having a title. Like I didn't really care about that stuff. I think it was more about like
Just
again
an
like
innate desire to make photographs.
just going out and just doing it because I wanted it to. Like there's really no other way of living.
I think that's beautiful. I think, that's come to me super late in life, and a lot. I unfortunately have a knack for telling people how jealous I am of them to have been able to find this thing that I love so much earlier in life.
Yeah,
Because it's just such a beautiful. It's made my life infinitely better in ways that I can't possibly articulate or measure, and for that I'll always be sort of jealous of people who've been able to sort of stumble upon it at an earlier life.
yeah.
Talk to me about, like, what the career has been like, right? So, the early days of Instagram and creating Tainted Mag, and sort of like what your whole sort of social media experience has been like, and how you've sort of evolved yourself as an artist over the last few years.
Yeah, so again, I think that once I started to realize that, you know, people were calling me a photographer, people were saying that I was an artist or introducing me as one, I started to look at it more like, okay, this is really dope. I always wanted to be like a cinematographer. That was kind of like what I always wanted to do, to like be able to tell a story in a different way. And like I always thought film was beautiful. And of course, like I was always inspired by like television.
Hmm.
Um, and just the way things were just kind of like you were able to remember certain like a nostalgic moment where you put yourself in this moment and you think, oh yeah, I remember, I can relate to that. And I always thought I wasn't to be a cinematographer. That's kind of what I was going for. I never went to school for it or anything like that. But I think that once I started to really like take the role of a photographer and become a professional was when like I remember one time I was working at a hotel as a bus as a bellman, and I was grabbing this girl's luggage one time. It was super late at night, and she had flown in from New York, and I was helping her with her bags, and I take her to her room, but I was actually being really cool with her, and I just like I liked her style, that she looked like an artist, and so I just simply said that. I'm like, you look like an artist. I'm like, are you an artist? And she's like, no, I'm actually not. And she was like, no, I'm actually, I'm not an artist, but are you an artist? And I'm like, hey, I'm a photographer. And I just said it like that. And she's like, oh, I'd love to see your work. And I shared my work with her, and she was like pretty much floored by her expressions. And the next day she was looking for me, but I was off work. And then the following day when I come to work, there's a note left in the front desk, and my manager said this lady was looking for me, like she really wants to talk to me. And so I waited for her, and we got a chance to chat. And she ended up being a set director for CBS.
Holy
And
shit.
she wanted to buy my work for a show that she was doing, called Vegas, which was like taking place in Las Vegas, like in the 1950s, or something around that era. And so my work for her really reflected like the 50s in some of the ways that I was composing images with film. And I was at that time I was shooting expired Ilford film,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like my favorite film to shoot because it was like the blacks were so black, and like it just looked so grainy, and it was beautiful. It had, you didn't know kind of what you would expect from it. And so we got in contact, and she bought like I think 15 pieces for
Oh
the
shit.
show. And I think at that time, man, I felt like that's when I was like, okay, like I think I'm professional now because I'm selling my work to CBS.
Yeah.
That's legit, you know.
Yeah. Dude,
I was going.
again, like, I'm sorry, that is serendipity, right? You're fucking pulling someone's bag up to their room late at night. Like, you could have easily been on break. You could have easily been off that day. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
serendipity, man. That's fucking awesome.
And I honestly think I photographed those images. I think it was like on a Pentax K1000,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like it was like what, $100 or something like that. But I
Yeah.
made these photos, and like, yeah, she loved them, and like that was like, dude. I mean, that for me was like shit. Like I went home that night, and I'm like, okay, I'm an artist, like I had to put a website together. I did the whole nine, man, but I felt like that was the first time I got a real big taste of like success. Of course, I had been paid for little small things here and there, but just to shoot stuff like a model or something like that, but nothing to that caliber where it's like, okay, like the big times want your work. I think that's, it says something about what you're doing.
Dude.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had the benefit of I've sold some prints in my life. Actually, a fair number. I've sold some NFTs. I don't think there's anything. Getting hired for work is great, right? Like being seen as valuable to a brand, to an agency, to whoever is great. I don't think anything compares to someone saying, "Hey, I want to buy your photograph and hang it in my room, right, in my apartment, in my house, in my home." Like that feeling is irreplaceable in the
Yeah, I
context
agree.
of the career, for sure. Are you like an everything happens for a reason kind of person?
Yeah, I think I am. 100%. I'm not super religious, but I do have strong relationships with God. And I always feel like God is always looking out for me, bro, like in this weird way. Like we have these interactions where I'm like, damn, like I just prayed about that, like, or this happened because of that. But I also do feel like, everything does happen for a reason, for sure.
I agree, and in the two just glaring instances of I work in construction in Iowa, and the building I'm building is a photo lab, right? And then like I'm
Yeah.
pulling the bags of a person to their hotel room, and they're a set designer for CBS, and they buy 15 of my pieces. I mean, that is a pretty glaring, view of the universe telling you, "Hey, Castro, knock, knock,
Yeah.
knock." Right?
Yeah. And honestly, it didn't even end there. I had another crazy situation where, like, so at that time, and again, I was shooting with $100 camera, this film. And I remember having like a Nikon D40. And I think it was like, at that time, that was my first digital camera. And it was like this shitty little digital
Yeah.
Nikon camera. But I was doing cool things with it. It was nothing special. It had a built-in flash and everything like that. But I had an exchangeable lens, and I thought, oh shit, I'm professional. Like
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
it came with a bundle like of a 200 millimeter lens, 70 to 200.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was killing it. Like, yo, I'm crushing it, bro. I got a sick camera. Like, I'm set. But that didn't take me very far because I think it was like 16 megapixels or something crazy. Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
nothing.
That was big back in the day, though.
I was big back then, yeah. But dude, it got better. Like working in this hotel, this fucking guy that was a photographer for True Religion,
Wow.
was staying in the hotel, and he was from Denmark, I think. And his card was declining. And he became my friend after a few days. And he said to me, like, hey, the hotel had to lock him out of the room because he couldn't, pay for anything, and all his shit was in the room. And he said to me, can I borrow money? And I'm like, I don't got money for you to fucking borrow. I'm a bellboy, like I got no money.
Yeah.
He goes, do you know anywhere where I can sell my camera? He had a 5D Mark II.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, that was the hottest camera.
Yeah. Top of the line.
Top of the line, bro. Dude, he sold his camera to me for $400
Huh.
with a fucking L series lens, which was like that's 24 to 70 millimeter L series lens. That whole thing was like at least $3,600 at that time, and he sold it to me for $400. And I went and I asked my ex girlfriend at the time to please let me borrow money, and she let me borrow $400, and I got it. And bro, like ever since then, I was just crushing it with that, like street photography on like crack. I was out there killing it, capturing everything. I was selling prints. Dude, it really blew up. At that time, I felt like, okay, I'm legit as fuck. Now I can also do cinematography on this camera. Like it was game over, man.
That's crazy. Dude, that is insane.
I
I
know. I
mean
just
that.
want
I
to.
mean, so like, I'm very similar to you. I'm like a really spiritual person. I'm not huge into religion, but like, when you're open to the universe providing you with like signs and sort of like points in the right direction, like I think good things happen, right? So similarly, I lost my job in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, and I had really no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I just packed my Jeep and I started driving around the country with my cameras and taking pictures. And it dawned on me that this is what I need to be doing, right? Like that feeling that I got making
Yeah.
art while I was on this trip was like filled me up, right? But like to have multiple instances where the universe is just really conspiring to tell you, like, hey, Castro, this is what you need to be doing. Like, fuck
Yeah.
all this other stuff. This is what you need to be
Yeah.
doing. I mean, that's wild.
I agree, bro. It's been an amazing journey, and I'm very grateful, bro. I always say that photography kind of saved my life, because I don't know honestly I don't know where I would be right now if it wasn't for art and photography, and now I have so much respect for it, and I just love that the community that I found, after Instagram, and the community that I even built like on my own Instagram page, has been an incredible support source. Like, I was creating work, I think, at one point, and people were just really loving it, and they were always, leaving positive feedback, and I loved it. We were able to build a sort of like, this community, and like the support was awesome, and then yeah, I think that always carried on, and I always had this kind of like weight on my shoulder where I had to create to make sure that I give people what they want. And I think a lot of artists have that pressure, and especially when social media started coming around, like I felt it even more. But I didn't want to lose myself in creating for somebody else. I think this whole journey started really because I was being authentic to myself and my craft, and I wanted it to always represent who I am as a person. And I think that I took a step back because I wanted to make sure that I was creating authentic work and it wasn't forced. And so I just decided to kind of like step back a little bit and just do other stuff as well, other stuff that I love, like painting and film photography, and like not necessarily have to share it online, but just really be like, I like to sit on my work. I have a crazy amount of archives, and like I just sit there and like I look through my old stuff. And now that this NFT space is here, it's like, dude, it's even more exciting to go back through your archive and like try to formulate a collection or something like that. Like
Yeah,
it's exciting times, man. I'm just super inspired again. Is what I'm trying to say.
that's awesome.
And
I'm
yeah,
you mentioned pressure to create and sort of like pressure to perform, and I find
yeah,
social media to be exhaustive at times because it's a time suck, it's an emotion suck. It's like you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. When you look at your own work in relation to the other like people that are creating on Instagram or Twitter or NFTs, etc., do you ever doubt yourself? Do you ever struggle with imposter syndrome? Do you ever question your own abilities or confidence in the work that you create?
no, 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 not the work that I create. I always look at people and I'm like, fuck, they're killing it. Like if anything, it pushes me to be more of a go getter. Like go create, go do the things. Because I have a journal of like projects that I always want to shoot, and like I always check stuff off, and I that's my favorite part of checking off a project. And again, I have stuff that sits there where I created since the pandemic started, where I haven't released, but I'm satisfied with it because it's there, and it's like it's like I always say, man, it's okay to be a little selfish as an artist. Like you don't always got to put stuff out there, but there's two sides of the coin, right? Like one, you can miss out on opportunity
Mm-hmm.
of like, damn, if someone would have saw this earlier, like who knows the success you would have had. And then two, it could be that like somebody else created the same work that you had in mind, and you thought that you were the person that made this whole project up. But I don't think that way. I think if anything, it's just like I do things for myself first, and what I think is dope and what I feel is authentic. And then, again, I am inspired by the people though that are pushing it hard, especially in the NFT space. I think if anything, it's like, man, it's like it's super inspiring to see other artists winning because it's like that could be you, that could be us. Like, what are we doing though? Like, I feel like there's always little things that we can tweak out to be like a better version of yourself as an artist. And like some people, they're lacking the hustle. And again, like for me personally, like in real life, I've always been that kind of person of like pushing myself to get myself out there, knocking on doors, hitting up galleries. That's always that's me. Like that's what I've always done. And now being here in the space, I feel like if I brought that energy into this space, and if all you got to do is just use like Twitter and like connect with people, like that's it's like, dude, that's so easy. It's
Yeah.
easier.
It's easier. It is easier.
But it's also hard at the same time because everyone's doing it.
It also doesn't help that the market is rapidly deteriorating on a hour by hour basis, for sure.
No, can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, man. I think maybe it's probably better that I'm ignorant to like crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And I know dude, I'm like super beginner, right?
Yeah.
I only know the basis. Like I can barely scratch the surface on crypto, and if you ask me certain questions, like I won't know.
I'm with you on that as well. I am not extremely well versed in the crypto space, and I think what makes it both a exciting and traumatic time in the space is that it corresponds with what was starting to be a really cool opportunity for photographers, right? We had finally found sort of a space where we could belong and share our work and make money that was built outside of the traditional gallery scene, right? And the traditional gallery scene is an inherently difficult place to live, and it's an incredibly difficult place to become, I'm going to use air quotes of a member, right? So like in order to get your work in a gallery, get a gallery show, sell work, like these are all like, it's not just straightforward whether you're good or not. It's like, who do you know? Who wants to support you? It's like, it's hard, right? And what was nice about the NFT space as short as 3 months ago was there was no barrier to entry. You can open up an OpenSea account, you can mint some fucking work, and you could put a collection together and share it with the world. And if people saw it and liked it, they could buy it. And you didn't have to go through a gallery, and you didn't have to go through finding a curator who saw something in your work. It was you alone that was able to curate and create your own collection.
Right.
The problem with that is that in the last 6 months, the price of Ethereum has dropped by about, about 65, 70%. And there are severe, shaky points in the marketplace right now. People have lost millions of dollars, billions of dollars in crypto. That makes it now an inherently difficult space to get traction and make sales for because, like, say for argument's sake, you used to sell a piece at 1 ETH and your collectors had millions of dollars in ETH and they were like, cool, I can buy 5 of these pieces at, an ETH each. But now ETH is, 70% less. A lot of collectors have lost a lot of money. So they're proclivity for investing and purchasing has dried up. So what happens is when you're in a bear market like we are in now, the money pulls out of these tertiary sort of investment places like crypto, right? They come out of places that are not rock solid and they flee the market. So to me, I look at it as like, it's going to be rough out here for a while. No big deal. I'm not in it to make a living, right? I'm here just to have fun and fuck around and enjoy myself.
Right.
So it's inherently not the best time in the world, but if you look at it from a collecting perspective, I think there's tremendous value to purchasing and buying assets right now. If you buy my NFT for one Ethereum right now, and it's $1,100, and 18 months from now it's back to $3,000-$4,000, a coin, a token, you've made a lot of money just inherently buying my piece now. Right. So there's a lot of weird shit that's going to go on in the next 6 months in the space. I mean, the stock market's fucking tumbling like a motherfucker too. I mean, you look at fucking oil prices are going through the roof and commodity prices are going through the roof and inflation is crushing everyone across the board. We're not in the best place as a society right now.
I agree with that. But I like what you said though at the end. Is like right now if you're investing into a NFT that's 1 Ethereum, right? and right now it's $1,100, and in 3 months it jumps back up because we don't know what the market's going to be like in 3 months, right?
No idea.
I mean, we've seen it fluctuate.
Yeah.
Well, it hits a positive, and now you're sitting on a fucking gold mine that you invested when crypto was low. That's how I'm seeing it.
I
That's
see. I see it similarly. For instance, I bought a couple photographs last week, a couple NFTs last week, and I think I paid like point 0.1, point 0.2, 0.08. Like I bought 3 or 4 pieces. And I look at it now and they're worth half as much as I paid for them. But I also look at them when I bought them as this is half as much as it would have been 3 months ago. Now,
right.
that's not always the best way to look at things, but
Right.
I'm a glass half full person, and my belief is that Ethereum as a blockchain is not going to disappear. What will likely transpire is it's going to go another 20 to 30% lower, it'll level out, and then it'll slog around that leveling of around $800-900 a token for a few months, and then we'll start slowly seeing things pick back up. But again,
Right.
it's just a symptom of the fact that the greater economy is slowing. We're entering a recessionary period from a fiat money, monetary perspective, and this is just what happens. Like these ancillary investment places get fucked, and that's what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that, but I feel like also like I come kind of from a little old school mentality where when shit gets hard, man, what do? You just keep going, right? Like you don't have time to sit there and fucking complain and tweet about shit, and like that's cool. I see it all the time, but it's okay to release frustration because I think we're all frustrated. But again, I see it like more as an opportunity to continue to keep growing, putting yourself out there, explore the marketplaces. I mean, I'm even seeing big hitters like asking like, hey, I want to buy some stuff right now, like market's low, like what do you guys got? Like
Mm-hmm.
people that I have never even seen tweet something like that. They're like they're trying to open the doors. So I think it could be a good opportunity, but at the same time, I understand all this frustration. It's like it's tough, especially if you're only making money on selling NFTs right
Yeah,
now.
I think that's in the current state of the world. Being a full time NFT photographer is an unrealistic job title to have. You need to
Right.
supplement that income in a dozen different ways before you could ever hope to or expect to be a full-time NFT photographer. There's probably a handful of them who have been able to make some life-changing money in the space, but even they are going to struggle moving forward, right? Even the extremely well-collected photographers are going to have problems moving forward. And it's systemic. I mean, these are the things that happen when you have a bad market. And that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, just like life, things go up and things go down, and you will inevitably end up in a place that you're supposed to be, whether it's a good market or a bad market.
I agree. Well said, bro. I
You
like I like I like what you said.
Thanks, man. You mentioned that back in the day, one of your big dreams was cinematography. Do you have like a big dream now, like something that you look forward to that you hope that you can accomplish in your either life or photography career, or whatever it might be?
Man, big dreams now. I definitely have. I definitely still dream very big, but I think these are tangible dreams. So maybe they're goals, but I still see them as dreams because like I don't have them yet in my possession.
Yeah.
So I think like when you talk about art, I like, of course, I would love to exhibit my work globally around the world, and I feel like that's when NFTs were super exciting for me.
Oh yeah.
Whereas like you
Hmm.
have the opportunity now, you just fucking submit a JPEG and it might end up somewhere in
You have no
London
idea. Yeah.
or you know. And I think that's the beauty about it. That's like what's most exciting for me in this space is that it gives you more, definitely a bigger platform for sure. Um, but apart from that, everything is just kind of like, and I want my businesses to flourish and I want to be successful in a sense where I want to be able to um, focus on art full time and be able to support my, my dreams, having a gallery one day, both physical and digital would be amazing. That's a big dream of mine.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, just continue. But I'm slowly doing that right now with, with what I have at my disposal and being able to utilize that. Um, it may be in a different in a different way, right? Like making my dreams come true, maybe in a smaller way. I think is pretty cool. Like seeing the Tainted magazine, where that's going right now, and I'm in the process of rebuilding the website. I'm launching the NFT platform, which is probably not the best time right now, of course, but
Could be the best time.
it could be the best time. And I think I see it that way. It's like people are even saying, why did you launch your Genesis collection during this time? But I felt, again, because I can come in at a good price of where I'm thinking back 3 months ago what 0.33 probably was, maybe close to like $900,
Hmm.
and now it's like half of that, or even $300, something like that.
Yeah.
But then when it goes back up, my prices will at least be somewhere there. And I think that it gives me an opportunity to come in at a respectable price of
When
where
you
I would want to be at.
when you initially dropped your collection, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you sold like two, three, or four pieces right away, right?
Yeah, I sold 3 pieces
Yeah. What was that
within a
like?
week. Dude, that's I mean, again, it's just like just putting yourself out there. I think I was definitely nervous for the first time in a long time because I haven't done anything like that since this NFT space launch. I've been kind of like in a background, just kind of like listening in and being a student, and then ripping that bandit up and being on the other side has been very cool to see. Like, now we're talking about it. Now my project is live. Is living out there. It's on a blockchain. Now people can see it and collect it if they want. I think that's exciting, man. Like
Yeah.
I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it, and like even if the market's fucking down, I don't care. I think it's dope, and I think it's a good opportunity for people to, look at other stuff that maybe they haven't seen on a blockchain. And I think that my stuff a little bit, it's a little different. It's not like your average maybe street photograph. It's like definitely more of a vibe. Like you feel something a little bit like mysterious.
I had a favorite of mine. I forgive me, I don't remember what it was called, but it was like a guy. And it wasn't the subway, but it was like the metro. It was a metro station, and it
Yeah,
was
that's my
like,
favorite too.
what was it?
See, that's my favorite too. The guy with the hat.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
yeah.
That piece has been like that was gonna be like the cover of like the collection,
Hmm.
but then I really love the police car as well,
Yeah,
and I think like I'll just leave it that way. That one's called Night Owl.
yeah. I love that photo. Talk to me about sort of like that curation process, because when I was creating my first collection, which I actually just burned like yesterday or the day before. Um, what was that curation process like? Did you have fun with it? Was it like a stressful event? Like, what was that sort of whole process like for you?
It was crazy because I went back like 7-10 years in like my work and my archives, and like I started digging out moments where I felt like I could relate to the scenes that I was like documenting during that time. It was like during a time where I felt like really I didn't have a home. I had really no family that I can live with here in LA. My mom was living in Vegas. I felt kind of like definitely alone. I didn't really feel like I had a purpose, and I felt lost. And I felt like a lot of these subjects in these photographs are powerful, and like, but they also represent this sort of like lonely spirit. Like they feel kind of like they're searching for something as well. And a lot of the moments that I captured definitely embody that time for me as a person, and like it was almost like we were all lost and searching for a purpose. And definitely like going through my archives, I pulled out like 100 photos, and like I didn't know where to start, but I wanted to start somewhere where it was an authentic representation of me as an artist and where my roots were, where I've grown my roots in like in photography. And so yeah, I went back to this to get picking 100 photos and narrowed them down to like 15.
Hmm.
So that was definitely a little bit stressful, but I think I think they work together well.
That's awesome, man. I mean, anytime you put a collection together and you put yourself and your work and then share that work with the public, there is equal parts like relief that it's done, and then like now it's living out there, and then you've like made some sales, so it's like validation that is a good collection, that the work is good, that there's value for it in the NFT space. It's like just like so many emotions that go through all of that, but at the end of the day, it's a net positive, right? You were able to create something on your own in a space that is going to be growing long term and is going to be a cool place in the future. And at the end of the day, that's all like a net positive.
100%. Yeah, I'm just super stoked to even be in a space, being able to have the opportunity to meet really awesome people, and I think that's what, like, if I'm taking anything away from it, is that although the market's low right now, but dude, we got a chance to really interact with really really amazing artists, people that we would have never even spoken to if it wasn't for this space. And you and I are here talking, and like I think it's really dope, man. I think it's like Doesn't get better than that, you know?
At the end of the day, I don't care if I sell another NFT. The friends that I've made along the way, the conversations that I've had in the space, and just like the amazing people that I've been able to cultivate and bring into my life that will remain there for a long time is and always will be the greatest takeaway from this space, right? I don't care if I make a lot of money. I don't care if I make zero money. But at the end of the day, those relationships and those people will always be paramount to whatever happens to me in my life. And I think that's
Yeah,
awesome.
100%, bro.
You were talking about how, like, getting your voice out in in some of these pieces, like talking about loneliness, and like you were kind of sort of, as most of us were during the pandemic, trying to figure out their place and stuff. Talk to me about what it's like to identify your voice as an artist, and like what you try to tell people with your work.
Um, well, yeah, definitely. I feel like the reason why I started photography is I'm not so good at, you know, being a storyteller. I don't think I can really formulate what I really feel sometimes. And I feel like when I create work, it definitely it's a language that I've learned to use and like be able to express what I really feel during those times. And so when you look at some of these works, I mean, you could just imagine yourself what the photographer might be feeling like. Like why was he in these dark moments, and do they represent? Is that exactly how the person might have felt during that time? And that's kind of what I've used. I think for me personally, like whether it's something cultured or if it's something that is deeply saddening, or documenting a moment of history where, you know, maybe there's disagreements in life with politics and all this other shit. Like I get to use that to tell my version of the story. And it's not always like, you know, again, it doesn't always have to represent like a sad part of it, but unfortunately it's like I'm only documenting the reality around me and the reality around my life. And it's not really always meant to tell like a sad story or like a pretty one. It's just the truth,
Mm-hmm.
really. And that's all I can really speak. I can't bullshit. You know, I
Yeah.
can't lie. It's not really who I am.
I like that, man. I think at the end of the day, like, it is innately difficult to like be facetious or not be authentically yourself in creating art, whether it's painting, whether it's photography, whether it's music or whatever. What you experience and how you experience it is impossible almost to not describe or show in your work. And in that regard, I think you are incredibly successful because you can feel the emotion in your work. You can feel the stories that you're trying to tell without conveying words, right? Like you can get that from the images, and I think that's what makes you a very powerful photographer and a great artist.
Thank you,
Um,
bro. I appreciate that, man.
yeah, no problem, man. I like to spend the last bit of every podcast doing sort of like a rapid Q&A. Some of them are super easy, some of them are a little bit more in depth. But my first
Sure.
question for you is, are you happy?
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Love that. What's your favorite book?
Goosebumps.
Is there a specific one or the whole series?
The whole series. I only like them because of cover as well.
Yeah, dude, it's funny. My well, he's 6 now. My 6-year-old nephew is obsessed with Goosebumps, like obsessed, and like all things Halloween. And his birthday was just last month, and all he got for his birthday was Halloween presents, and it's fucking adorable.
I love it. My mom's birthday is Halloween, so like anything Halloween is my favorite.
Oh, I love that. What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie, man. Man, I don't have a favorite movie. I
Movie or
mean,
movies? You can give me one or two.
okay, one movie that I really love has to be like The Sandlot, of course.
Oh, fuck yeah.
The Sandlot.
Of
Back to the
course.
Future, another one.
Yeah.
I love Titanic.
Yeah.
Titanic's one of my favorite movies. Um, fucking Wolf on Wall Street is sick.
So
Taxi
good.
Driver is amazing.
Really good. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
Um, Favorite food. I don't really have a favorite food, but I love Mexican food, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and I love Puerto Rican food as well.
Okay. Desert Island, what's your last meal? Like, the only thing you can eat every day for the rest of your life on a deserted island.
Probably a tostada bowl.
Okay, fair enough. Do you believe in an afterlife?
Somewhat, but I've been questioning lately.
Yeah, it's interesting. I again, not much of a religious person, although I have had a priest on my podcast before. Um, I think about just like the grand scheme of like just the sheer improbability that we are here having this conversation today, that we just actually exist in the physical world is just like preposterous, right? Like I think
Yeah.
it's like 400 billion to 1 just to be born. Like that to me strikes me as something that is so highly unlikely and improbable that there has to be something after, right? They couldn't just be this. So that, that's sort of where I go with that.
I hope so, man. I mean, I always question like, are we are we really gonna be remembered? Like I remember like a couple weeks ago, my sister said that they were talking about me, and I was just thinking like to myself like, how will we know when someone remembers us? Like if
Mm,
I didn't feel them talking about me in the physical form, like how would I know when I'm dead or when I'm gone that they're gonna remember me?
that's a great question, man. Um, I think about that a lot too. I think my hope is that the way I treat people and my deeds here in the time that I'm here will leave a lasting memory of who and what I am and what I represent. And, if at the end of the day I'm missed and I'm, for not forgotten, but like always wanted to be, remembered. I think at the end of the day, that's really all you can ask for. It's
Yeah,
tough.
I agree. I agree. And also it's about like being selfless sometimes where
Oh yeah.
like if I'm leaving this earth with memories, knowing that like I love my family, I love my wife, I love my friends, and I was always there for them, like I think that's enough. And if I'm
Totally.
not remembered, that's cool because it's not a selfish act. It's more like
I
I
agree.
remember them and I love them, and that's just good enough.
I agree completely. What are you most proud of?
Man, it's a hard question.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I immediately think about my family, of course,
Yeah,
but then I also immediately like think about my life and where I am, and how I haven't given up, and I just been kind of just following my dream and my purpose, and like
that's
continuing being
that.
real.
That's a lot to be proud of. That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I mean, you answered that pretty easily for someone who thought it was hard. What's the best piece of advice someone's ever given you?
The piece of advice that someone's given me. Um,
My
I
b-
guess one thing that I always think about and I can't stop saying is like just be true to yourself. Like
yeah,
whether that's creating, being true to what you're really saying, being true to your friends, and I feel like that all has to do with karma, like good
oh yeah,
karma. And so yeah, I just always being real, just keeping it 100. Like just being yourself and being authentic. That's definitely like what I've always
I love that,
inspired me.
man. I've been harping a lot lately of don't worry about the wreckage of the future, right? Like so, like whatever is going to be, and there's probably very little that I can do by way of, impacting what's going to come in my life. And if you can stop worrying about what may or may not transpire, I think you can live with a lot more grace and give yourself a lot more space to live.
I agree.
My last question for you is: give me a recommendation for something that you've recently consumed. Could be a book, a podcast, a movie, a TV show, just something that you recently consumed that you would like everyone to check out.
Hmm. Man, you're getting me with these questions, bro.
Mine is I just finished a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It is an immensely powerful, very haunting, very turbulent story, and I think something that anyone can learn quite a bit about humanity and overcoming tremendous adversity in life, and it's impacted me quite tremendously.
Yeah, it's funny because I think for me it's like the opposite. Like I'm consumed and I'm super inspired by an artist, Bad Bunny. He's a Puerto Rican, uh, he's a reggaeton rapper. But man, this guy, I think he's just not scared to be him. He's not scared to put work out there that people might judge. He doesn't care. He puts himself out there, and I love that about him. I think that it's super impactful in a way that we're both Latinos, and like he just doesn't give a fuck,
Yeah,
really. He just has his middle fingers in the air. And it's like you can love me or you can ride with me. And like I really love that attitude that he like really represents, like the people that have dreams, the people that might be immigrants coming to this country and like searching for better and like, trying to chase their dreams. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, he's also creating a hell of a career for himself, just even outside of music, right? I mean, he's fucking doing everything these days.
Yeah, he's about to be a superhero.
I know, it's crazy. Like it's honestly crazy. He's like legit. He's transcending, and I think a lot of that boils down to what he's been able to do with his music. That he is so relatable and so able to transcend just what he does from a music perspective. That he's now doing a million amazing other things, which is just really fucking cool.
Yeah, yeah, no, his album that he dropped recently is called Un Verano Sin Ti. It's sick. It's
Yeah.
like it has so many elements of like, just music and storytelling and love and like just real raw shit. And I love that. And I love that. So I mean, if
Yeah.
anybody out there hasn't listened to Bad Bunny's album,
I don't think there's very many people out there who haven't. But if you are one of the people who haven't, please
yeah,
feel free to check it out.
check it out.
Castro, man, dude, thank you so much for coming on today. I know you've got a big move coming up this week, and you got a lot on your plate. I'm immensely appreciative that you've taken this hour out to come chat with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. I have an immensely cheesy line. If you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family, and yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm just so happy and appreciative that you gave me your time.
John, thank you, brother, for your time. I appreciate you, bro. You're my man. You're my bro. And anything I can do to support you and whoever's listening, community, please reach out. I have Tainted Magazine, where I've been inspired by so many different artists, and my journey's been supporting other artists since 2018, and I've been curating this shit by myself. And I would love to hear from you guys, and let's connect. My DMs are open. You can hit me up, and I would love to support you. Thank you, guys.
Oh, that's fucking awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time, and take it easy.